I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
We laugh with them, we cry with them.
They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings.
And with Hollywood's help from movies like The American President, we heap on them our greatest expectations.
They want leadership. They're so thirsty for it, they'll crawl through the desert toward a mirage, and when they discover there's no water, they'll drink the sand.
Presidential leadership is Colorado College professor Thomas Cronin's specialty, and he is struck by America's perhaps too perfect wish list for a president.
It seems like an amalgam of wanting Mother Teresa, Mandela, Rambo, the Terminator, and Spider-Man all wrapped into one. It's a pretty outlandish job description.
You realize that he is the only one of the founding fathers who never owned a slave.
David McCullough has written extensively on our greatest presidents, among them John Adams.
Well, this is one of the many, many letters of John Adams. This is the real thing.
Adams wrote to his wife Abigail on his first night as president, staying in what was then called the president's house.
Some lines from that letter were carved into the mantelpiece in the state dining room at the White House at the wish of Franklin Roosevelt. May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. And I loved that because you noticed he puts honest first, ahead of wise.
Why?
Because honesty is essential.
To McCullough, the great presidents shared a common set of qualities.
They had courage, and they had integrity, and they had patience, and they had determination.
Determination, like Teddy Roosevelt, who knew the Panama Canal would be good for American commerce and defense, helping American ships move from one ocean to the other, and he got Americans to follow his vision.
Unprecedented for us to do anything like that beyond our own borders. Tremendous cost and a tremendous risk. But he then participated in decisions by going to Panama to see things for himself. First time a president ever left the country while in office.
And the best lead not only with actions, but with words.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
One speech could change history.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
That the torch has been passed
All
to a new generation
superb
of Americans.
speakers who delivered moving speeches, speeches that lift us to want to attain more and higher achievement than we might believe we're capable of. That's leadership.
Ask what you can do for your country.
Presidents Nixon, Ford, Reagan.
John Kennedy's words launched David Gergen's career as an advisor to 4 presidents.
I do believe that President Obama has got to be the unifier in chief.
He would add another trait that defines the best, persuasion, like FDR's fireside chats in World War II.
My fellow Americans,
He told everybody before he gave his speech, go out and buy a map of the Pacific. And while he was on the radio, he said, get out your maps. I want to talk to you about where we are.
I ask you to look at your maps again, particularly at that portion of the Pacific Ocean lying west of Hawaii.
He talked about the various islands and where we've been and that sort of thing. That's the role of a persuader, is to bring the country along with him.
But for President Barack Obama on the eve of his second term, time may be running out. We re-elect a president for 4 more years, but in truth, he only really gets about a year to 18 months before his effectiveness begins to fade in the jockeying for a successor. So that's about all the time he has to do those last big things that will define a legacy. For this president, his second-term agenda means not just winning over the country.
Most people who know me know I'm a pretty friendly guy.
But also his opponents. The first president who understood inside the Beltway persuasion was Thomas Jefferson, who faced politics as polarized as any today.
He believed, I think rightly, that it is harder to say no to someone when you know them.
John Meacham's latest book is Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power.
The lesson for President Obama from Thomas Jefferson is to use the dinner table, to bring people around, come to the president's house.
You mean literally have dinner?
Yes.
I mean like
literally.
sit and chat?
Yes, that's what Jefferson did. Every night Congress was in session. I wouldn't want to have dinner with members of Congress every night, but I didn't run for the job. He did.
David Gergen offers another suggestion about socializing for political gain.
In the first nearly 4 years of his presidency, Barack Obama played, I think, 104 rounds of golf. He played with one Democrat the entire time in the Congress and with one Republican, John Boehner. That was it. There were 102 opportunities to play with other members of Congress, build up relationships.
At the start of his first term, President Obama invited historians, including David McCullough, to the White House, looking for guidance from past presidents.
Washington, Adams, Lincoln.
But Mr. Obama may be surprised at one addition to the list, who McCullough now considers one of the greatest.
And Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford?
Gerald Ford.
Why?
Because Gerald Ford was a very good president.
Of all the presidents that you could have mentioned, Gerald Ford would never.
Because he seemed ordinary.
Come to my mind,
He seemed ordinary to people.
But you say
I think Gerald Ford's one of the most interesting stories in the whole history of the presidency. And he made one of the bravest decisions of any of the presidents.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
From one of the worst moments in presidential history,
I, Gerald R. Ford,
came one that many now consider the finest.
A full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon.
An act of political courage that truly healed the country.
David Gergen, an advisor to President Ford, says Ford knew it could cost him re-election.
Gerald Ford had the shortest presidency in the 20th century, but I think in the rear view mirror of history, he looks better and better.
There never seems to be a shortage of those who want to lead us.
Follow me. Follow me. We're going to climb that mountain. That's the kind of leader we want.
Few make it. Fewer still shape history.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade.
The best of them,
not because they are easy, but because they are hard,
are the ones who bring out the best in us.